Is Jon Moxley versus Kenny Omega's AEW All Out match ruined by New Japan Pro Wrestling G1 Climax 29? We'll talk about it next on the Squared Circle Psychobabble. Hello and welcome to the Squared Circle Psychobabble. My name is Michael Valenti. This is Ralph Valenti. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit that bell for notifications as we're trying to hit 10,000 YouTube subscribers before All Elite Wrestling's All Out, which is happening August 31st in Chicago. One of the big matches on the night is Jon Moxley versus Kenny Omega. Now, there hasn't been a lot of build to this match because for the last month and a half, Jon Moxley has been in the G1 Climax tournament for New Japan Pro Wrestling. It was looking good for him throughout the first 5 matches. He won all 5 matches, but then he went on a tailspin. He got Yano'd. He lost to Switchblade Jay White, who ended up winning the B block. He lost to Hiroki Goto. And then he lost to Juice Robinson, who was someone that he beat for the IWGP United States Championship. So basically, I guess you could kind of say that the credibility for Moxley is almost gone already. But it's hard to say because it's the G1 Climax and you're talking about the best of the best in New Japan. But to start 5-0 and then lose 4 straight, to me, that does not look good for Moxley.
It definitely doesn't look good, but again, we've talked about this previously, and if I'm New Japan, I actually think, from the outside looking in, they did this the right way. So all along, we kind of said one thing: the Juice Robinson match was going to be the end-all, be-all. He was either going to win and go on to the finals, or he was going to lose and be eliminated, and we were right about that. And I think most people assumed that match being last was going to mean more than just that match being last. There was going to be something more on the line. And obviously that was the case.
Right.
Now, for the way that New Japan decided to book this, I think they were actually smart because if you think about it, the first 5 matches when Moxley continued to win and continue to gain steam and momentum, that was all people were talking about. You know, hardcore fans, whoever watched New Japan Pro Wrestling, it was all over the internet how good he was doing. And if I'm New Japan Pro Wrestling, that's the right way to book it, because when you look from the outside looking in, who's the most popular, the most noticeable name within the G1? Yes, Okada is big in Japan, but Moxley across, worldwide notoriety as Dean Ambrose from the WWE, he's the biggest guy. He was bigger than a Kenny Omega when Kenny Omega was in it last year. I'm not saying he's better in ring, but his name goes further. It touches more people. He has the potential to draw more eyes to your product.
Okay.
So having Moxley win and having it get out there where people, his name, it's like, oh, he's in New Japan, he's winning, he could potentially go on and win this whole thing. That's smart because you're drawing the people into your product, and now you get to expose like his matches against guys like Naito and Jay White and show those new eyeballs and those people that are now watching your product. Like these are the guys that we have to offer. So having him lose towards the tail end of it, it's not necessarily good for him going into AEW, but I don't think hardcore fans are going to read into that too much. I think what New Japan was primarily doing, and they learned this probably from having Chris Jericho face Kenny Omega. Jericho, when they had their match last year, they had it was something like, I don't know, they had thousands of new subscriptions because people wanted to see that match. They probably were like, okay, well, this is what can happen when you bring somebody in from the outside to our product. So a guy like Moxley can draw a lot of extra attention to your product. So they had him win, because if they bring him in and have him lose right from the get-go, there's no interest there.
Right. No, I totally understand that. I totally understand that. But you look at who his first loss was. His first loss was to Toru Yano. Now, I understand you don't know what to expect with Toru Yano, and he's tries to distract referees, tries to tie you up to things or other people, or get you tied into the apron to get himself a victory. And none of his matches go longer than, 5 minutes? But that should not have been Moxley's first loss. Switchblade Jay White, fine. That should have been his first loss. And it was technically his first pinfall loss. And Hiroki Goto is fine for a loss there. But then when you go from Yano to White to Goto to Juice and you just keep losing after starting 5-0, if this happened in WWE, where, you have Kofi Kingston going on a big run, 5 wins in a row, 10 wins in a row, and he ends up winning the WWE Championship or Intercontinental Championship, whatever title it is. And then he goes on a 4-match losing streak. They're all going to go, well, they don't know how to book him and they're burying him. But here, Moxley, it's like, oh, well, he's facing Jay White, who won the B block, and he's facing Goto, who's won the G1 before, and he's a former never open weight champion. And you start giving excuses to it. It's like, no, you lost 4 in a row.
Yeah.
4 in a row is 4 in a row. Whether you're Jon Moxley, Kofi Kingston, Jay White, Seth Rollins, Finn Balor, Matt Taven, Jay Lethal, whoever it is, 4 losses is 4 losses. And if you're AEW, I'm going to be pissed off that you let one of our big guys lose 4 straight matches in the G1 Climax.
Not to mention AEW is also a company that says what? It's all predicated on wins and losses matter.
Yes.
So having him lose 4 in a row, yeah, it's not a good look. I think it's something that fans will not remember. They're going to remember if he goes on to beat Kenny Omega, they'll just say, oh, well, yeah, he competed in the G1. It was cool and whatever else.
Right.
It was. And the key is not to read into it too much. But
No.
I get where you're coming from. And this is always going to be the problem. And I talked about this. When you share talent or you allow your talent to go back and forth, you got to start to consider like, okay, if you're top guy, if Kenny Omega is the heavyweight champion of AEW, and he goes over to Japan and faces Okada and he loses, okay, it's Okada. The hardcore fan's going to be like, oh, okay, well, it's just Okada. It's fine. It's not that big of a deal, but it kind of is a big deal.
Yeah.
It's not like these companies are competing against one another. You're not going to see Brock Lesnar go to Japan or AEW or Ring of Honor and lose to anybody. I guarantee you Vince McMahon will never, ever, ever let that happen. His top guys.
Look at what happened when they had Tony Storm versus B. Priestley at Stardom. They said, no, Tony Storm is not wrestling B. Priestley because B. Priestley's an AEW wrestler. Tony Storm is a WWE NXT champion. We're not having her lose to B. Priestley. No,
I mean, for what
do
it's
something
worth,
else.
For what it's worth, Moxley's biggest win probably through this whole thing was Naito. I
Yes,
imagine
yeah,
so.
I would agree.
And that's a big win, but he had to have a big win along the way to kind of make the whole thing believable.
Right.
It was just weird how they built him up only to bring him down. I don't think it's going to hurt him in the long run because it just maybe AEW says, they're not going to let guys go and do certain things like this because
here's the question. Now, I think recently in an interview, Moxley said he can do both. He can do AEW and he does New Japan. So if there's a point where AEW wants him, but New Japan has him or vice versa, how is that going to look for Jon Moxley?
I think he's primarily contracted to AEW.
Right.
So,
but that's the thing. Like domestically, AEW, internationally, New Japan. So what happens now? We have those 3 shows happening in Boston, New York, and Philadelphia for New Japan. If Moxley still has the U.S. Championship going into those shows, but he can't because he's contractually obligated to AEW, how does that look for New Japan? That their champion, one of their champions cannot be there. Yeah. That looks bad.
Kind of sounds like Brock Lesnar.
Or you go to All Out and he loses to Kenny Omega. Now, yes, it's Kenny Omega, a former United States champion in New Japan Pro Wrestling. I think he was the first, if I'm not mistaken. But then he's no longer in New Japan. So how does that look? That one of your champions is losing on another promotion that many people around the world are watching. So I think, honestly, while I get your point that it brought more people's eyes to New Japan, this looks worse for AEW than it does New Japan.
I agree with that part of it. I'm certainly not suggesting that AEW should be happy with this or it's not like it doesn't hurt Moxley's credibility. I think for the short term, yeah, it's going to hurt a little bit, especially because it was 4 in a row. But long term, I think AEW will build him up the right way, whether it's a win over Omega or whatever they have to do to build him up. He's too big of a name not to build back up.
Right.
But as far as New Japan Pro Wrestling, I think they played this the right way. Used Moxley, use his name, use his notoriety to attract fans to your product, have him lose to some of your top guys, like Jay White, obviously, going on to be in the finals. If I'm AEW and Tony Khan and the higher ups there, I'm definitely not happy about this.
No.
But, that's the risk you take when you allow your guys to go back and forth between different promotions.
Right. And that is something that they have to think about. They're saying, oh, we're going to have a lighter schedule so you can either take it off or do other commitments, and allowing Moxley to do stuff in Japan.
But this isn't like Moxley did a one-off in like some smaller promotion in Las Vegas.
Right.
Like it's New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Right.
And that's like direct competition right now to AEW. I know people talk about, WWE and AEW. They're not at that point yet, but New Japan Pro Wrestling, they're pretty big too. But that's like, direct competition in my opinion.
And I think what also hurts the fact that we're talking about the match between Moxley and Omega. I think what hurts most is the lack of television. We're not going to see television for AEW until October 2nd. So basically, you need to build around the Road to series to build this match. And not everybody is going to watch those.
You know what else nobody else is talking about? The big draw for like All In and everything leading into like some of their earlier shows was what? Kenny Omega was the hottest thing in the professional wrestling industry. Kenny Omega has wrestled sparingly over the past year or so.
Right.
Yes, he's an amazing talent. He's going to go out there. He's going to steal the show, I imagine. But he's not the hottest name in the wrestling industry right now.
No.
AEW as a whole is, but it's not like Kenny Omega's going out there week after week, month after month, stealing the show against some of the top guys in New Japan Pro Wrestling. And it's out there because let's not forget, that's one of the main reasons why AEW is here right now, because one of the things that was most talked about was his match with Okada and everything, and they had their trilogy or format, however many matches it was. He hasn't been performing. So, yeah, you're kind of relying on Jon Moxley and Omega to promote this themselves, whether that's through YouTube or Twitter or whatever else, but not as easy as you would think if you don't have TV. So
No. And the fact that their Road to series so far is 4 episodes in, and 3 of those lied heavily on the Shawn Spears versus Cody Rhodes match, which is not the main event, and neither is Kenny versus Moxley. That's a huge, huge problem that we are less than 3 weeks ago until All Out, and you yet to really promote Page versus Jericho. You've done one segment where Moxley talked to Omega, but we haven't gotten a response from Omega. Moxley is losing 4 in a row in the G1 Climax. So what?
Maybe it's because they assume the Rhodes and Spears match is the one they have to sell people on the most because...
Why? Those are the 2 most recognizable names.
Well, let me explain it. Because Chris Jericho is a recognizable name, and he's going to be wrestling for the heavyweight championship. So maybe they're saying that, okay, well, Jericho's going to sell the main event, and the fact that the title's on the line, that's going to be the selling point for that. You got Omega and Moxley. Moxley's a big name in the wrestling industry, as is Omega, and obviously they both kind of sell that match. Cody Rhodes is a big name, but Shawn Spears, I mean, yeah, he has some notoriety from his time in NXT as the Perfect 10 guy, but they're really trying to rebuild him, so maybe that's why they're putting so much emphasis on that feud, because they want to build that so much.
This sounds very WWE-ish to me, where, they throw on one big match, right? So you have Brock Lesnar versus Seth Rollins at SummerSlam. There's a little bit of a story to it, but they're basically banking on Brock Lesnar just being Brock Lesnar to sell the seats. You have Ricochet versus AJ Styles, which everyone knows is going to be a great match. So they're not really putting much of a story into that just because they know that's going to be
I've liked the build to that so far.
No, but I'm saying, like, they bank on these, this is going to be a great match, so you don't have to do much. And that's part of the reason Shinsuke Nakamura failed, and we talked about that in our last episode. And then they put so much focus on a story with something else. At WrestleMania, for example, it was Kofi Kingston versus Daniel Bryan. That was like the main story that was told, while they let Ronda Rousey, Charlotte, and Becky go, all right, well, Ronda's going to sell this. Yeah. Brock versus Seth, well, Brock's going to sell this. That basically what you're saying is, well, Jericho's going to sell this. The buzz of Moxley versus Omega is going to sell this. But to me, the kind of wrestling that I like is there has to be a freaking reason to have the match instead of just throwing these 2 together. at least you have the championship with Paige and Jericho. There's somewhat of a reason there. Omega versus Moxley, we don't know why they're wrestling each other.
You don't have the why. You don't have that. We know Moxley debuted and jumped Kenny Omega, and Kenny Omega came out and jumped Moxley, but you don't have the. What's the reason?
Right.
Tell me why I should care.
And that is part of the problem that the New Japan Pro Wrestling G1 Climax hurts this match, because in the month and a half, they could have built something there, but he's in Japan. Omega's here doing whatever with AEW and AAA, and now he's challenging Rey Fenix in a match for AAA. So it's like, where's your focus? Is it this or is it that? Yeah. You both work for the same company, but you guys are focusing on two different entities. Well, that's the problem.
I agree. And that's like we talked about, that's going to be one of the things that AEW is going to have to figure out. So
right. So, all right, let us know what you think. Has the New Japan Pro Wrestling G1 Climax ruined the match between Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to share this all over social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at SCPB Podcast. Subscribe and hit that bell for notifications. We're trying to hit 10,000 YouTube subscribers before All Elite Wrestling's All Out. For Ralph Valenti, my name is Michael Valenti. Thank you for watching the Squared Circle Psychobabble.